Fluff pieces. They're a necessary evil for every journalist who ever set pen to paper, or fingers to a keyboard, whichever the case might actually be. And that's basically the kind of story Winston Cup Scene Associate Editor Jeff Owens had in mind. Nothing more than a preview of the upcoming The Winston All-Star Race at Charlotte. Jeff went into the interview with Tony Stewart expecting a calm pony ride at the local petting zoo. What he got was an ornery bucking bull that had yet to be tamed.
The story was a complete accident. This was not the story we went to talk to Tony Stewart about on that day. This story came out of an interview at Richmond in May. I had requested an interview with Tony to talk about the All-Star race the following week. You know, he had a great rookie season. He had won 3 races, set a record for rookies by winning three races that year. So one of the benefits of that was he got to be in the All-Star race. So that was simply what I wanted to talk to Tony about. It was a fluff piece. Go over, get some quotes about Tony, about how excited he is about to be in the All-Star race.
According to Jeff, both he and Associated Press reporter Hank Kurz stopped Stewart to ask if he was sure of what he was saying.
And I do remember that at least twice. I remember the first time. Hank stops Tony and says, "Tony, are you sure about what you're saying? Are you serious about this?
Yeah.
Having a bad day?" And Tony says in very colorful language, "Do I look like I'm serious?" And
wow.
He went on his way. And then, Tony goes on again, and we both realize this is going to be pretty controversial and inflammatory stuff.
The interview was conducted outside the Joe Gibbs Racing Hauler, and soon a crowd formed, as if to prove Stewart's point about how crowded the Winston Cup garage had become.
Tony is looking at these fans, and they're waving stuff for him to sign, and he's getting angrier by the second. And at one point, he stops the interview or says, "Look at all these people." He goes, "That dude right there has been following me around all day long." He said, "I can't even go to the bathroom because that guy follows me everywhere I go." So it added to what Tony was saying. And
here's the thing. Stewart actually had a quite valid point. The garage was crowded. It was difficult to move around and through crowds of onlookers. Access to competitors in the garage was a two-headed beast. It was a factor in the sport's explosive growth. What other major American sport allowed fans to walk right into a team's locker room? At the same time, such close contact did create problems for those just trying to do their jobs.
And to me, the most telling, compelling quote in the story was the one where Tony said, "Everybody in this garage believes and says the same thing I'm telling you, but they don't have the guts to say it." He was 100% right.
When it came to crowds of fans in the garage area, even Dale Earnhardt once made his stance abundantly clear.
Dale Earnhardt used to complain about this stuff all the time, about too many people being in the garage, can't even go to the bathroom and all of this stuff. There was an incident, I believe it was at Talladega, and we were standing around Earnhardt's hauler, and people were everywhere, and he couldn't go anywhere without them following and asking for autographs and all of that stuff. And Dale says, "Watch this." And he walks over to the NASCAR hauler, and he knew that Mr. France and Mike Helton and a bunch of them were in the back having a meeting.
Yeah.
And he climbs up on the front door of the NASCAR steps and starts signing autographs. And pretty soon there's about 100 people surrounding the NASCAR hauler. And France and Helton and them are trapped inside, and they can't get out for quite a long while. And it was Dale's way of making this same point that Tony was making.
Jeff's story on Stewart was scheduled to run in the following week's issue of Winston Cup Scene, dated May 18th, the year 2000. It didn't happen. Adam Petty lost his life in an accident the following Friday on May 12th. Winston Cup Scene executive editor Tom Jensen made the call to pull the Stewart piece to make room for coverage of Adams' passing. Instead, the story on Stewart was published in the May 25th edition, and reaction was immediate.
And I see Mike Arning, Tony's PR guy, coming, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And I knew this was going to happen. So Mike comes over and he says, there's just a lot of unhappy people. Coach Gibbs is not happy, sponsor's not happy, and all that. And Tony's saying, he didn't say some of those things, and it was taken out of context and all that. And I think we need to talk about this. And I'm like, sure, no problem. And I told him, I said, well, look, but before we do this, I want you to, and I was prepared for this. I'd made a copy of the tape. I had the interview. So I said, I brought this for you. This is the original interview. Take it, listen to it, give it to Coach Gibbs, share it with whoever you like. And then I'll be glad to talk. But I want you to hear what Tony said. I want you to hear how he said it. And then so that you can see what I wrote, how I wrote it. And then you got both sides of the story.
And then
the next day, of course, Coach Gibbs called a press conference and made Tony come into the media center. And of course, this was, embarrassing and humiliating for Tony. And he made Tony come in and explain what he had said in this article. Retract some of it, take some of it back, but basically explain himself. And you guys know how it was at Charlotte. I mean, there's a ton of media people at Charlotte. So this room is packed. There's probably 100 or more people in there. And Tony's explaining it and everything. And he did it pretty well. I was waiting on him to rip me a new one. But to give Tony a great deal of credit, that never happened. He explained himself and, basically said, that's not exactly what I meant. I meant this, I meant that, whatever. So anyway, I thought that was probably the end of it. And we would be fine. And if they wanted to sit down and talk about it, I was glad to do that. Well, that's not the way it turned out.
In a lot of cases, the Charlotte press conference would have been the end of it. But then Stewart won the very next week at Dover.
And just really glad, Lord was with us today, and we've needed this. We had a couple media guys that threw us under the bus in some papers and really hurt our fan support, and hopefully this will help out a little bit. The fans know that it wasn't true. A lot of things were said that weren't right, but Joe Gibbs stood behind me, Home Depot stood behind me, and all these guys behind me, and we really needed this one.
And I heard Tony get out of his car in Victory Lane, and he said, can't remember if it was radio or TV, it might have been both, but he said, this has been a really tough week for me because some idiot down in Charlotte threw me under the bus. I'm like,
did he really?
Great. Here we go. So I just sort of laughed it up. It kind of ticked me off a little bit, but I just, okay, whatever. No big deal. I kind of laughed at it. I thought it was funny. No big deal.
Oh, but we're still not finished. After finishing up in Victory Lane, Stewart was next ushered up to the press box for his post-race winners interview.
And I start getting emails from people who are at Dover, writers in the press box saying, you're not going to believe what Tony's saying. I'm like, oh boy, what's up? What's going on? And Tony apparently was saying that I made all that stuff up, that he didn't say any of those things, that I took it out of context. It was grossly wrong, that I basically lied, that I made it all up. And all my colleagues and friends and people I work with and don't work with are emailing me and saying, Tony said this, Tony said this. And I'm like, geez, you got to be kidding me. So then that's when things got more complicated because I was ready to just let this thing blow over, and I thought it was going to. And then he does that. So at this point, we got a bigger problem because I can't stand for that.
No.
No matter what profession you're in, you take great pride in your job, and you can't have someone questioning your character and integrity. And one of the worst things they can do if you're a journalist is to claim that you made something up, that your story is not true, that I didn't say that. that's a serious charge to someone who's a journalist.
And then came Michigan.
After the first practice, I'm in the garage and I see Tony coming, and Tony sees me, and we're headed for each other. And I didn't know what was going to happen. And he's yelling at me, and I'm yelling at him. And Mike's grabbing Tony and pulling Tony back. And I think Tom was there, Jensen was there, and he grabbed me and held me back. So we kind of had to be separated a little bit in the garage. And you know, it just got worse. So, and then Tony's doing interviews and saying the same thing, that he didn't say that. He's a liar. He made it up, blah, blah, blah. So this just goes on for weeks.
For the rest of the 2000 season, Jeff and Stewart had an uneasy truce. It wasn't until Jeff got an invitation to visit Stewart at his home during the off-season that their chilly relationship began to thaw. Winston Cup Scene editor Deb Williams went with Jeff just in case.
We get there, and I will say that Tony was as gracious as a host as you could ask for. He was nice. He was polite. He was professional. He was friendly. He showed us around his house. He showed us the lake and all this stuff, and just very hospitable, just a great host. And we sat down and we talked about it, and in a very calm, polite manner, and we both sort of spoke our piece.
That meeting did the trick. For the rest of their time in NASCAR together, Jeff and Stewart worked relatively well together.
But over the course of time, of course, I had to go talk to Tony and cover him again. And he was always as cordial and polite and respectful to me as he could have possibly been. And I will say that I think he was more so toward me than he was some others, because he and I had already had this incident. I mean, I'd walk up to Tony in the media center after this happened, and he'd walk up and, put his arm around you or goose you in the ribs or something like that. And that kind of let you know that, hey, we're fine, no big deal. And from then on, anytime I needed to talk to Tony or needed an interview from him, I got it, and he was great. So I think through this whole issue, we both gained a lot of respect for each other. I think I gained respect for Tony for the way he tackled a controversial, important issue that was important to the garage that no one else was willing to do. And then he stood his ground. And I think he sort of respected me for doing the same thing. I wasn't going to back down either. I felt like I didn't do anything wrong, and I wasn't going to back down from that. And, once it was all said and done, I think we both gained a lot of respect for each other. I hope so anyway. And we were always fine after we finally put it behind us.
My name is Rick Houston, and I hope you've enjoyed this offering from the Scene Vault. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and let us know your Tony Stewart memories in the comments section below.